Anna Johnson was a successful attorney with over 15 years of experience, living with her husband, Andrew Brown, in a quiet suburb just outside of New York City. Their home was located in a well-to-do neighborhood near Greenwich, a place known for its calm streets and picturesque surroundings. From the outside, their life appeared perfect. A stable marriage, professional success, and a comfortable lifestyle. Anna had worked tirelessly to achieve a balance between her demanding career and her personal life, while Andrew was deeply invested in his work and finance. Despite the challenges of their busy schedules, they made an effort to maintain their relationship. Anna's younger sister, Marina, had recently moved to New York. Being 6 years younger than Anna, she had always looked up to her elder sister, admiring her accomplishments and determination. After graduating from college, Marina decided to move to the city in search of better career opportunities. The sisters had always been close, so when Marina settled in New York, she frequently visited Anna and Andrew. Anna was happy to have her sister nearby, as their family had been scattered across different states for years. Marina's presence brought a new energy to the household, and her frequent visits became a regular part of Anna and Andrew's routine. The dynamic between the three of them seemed easygoing. They often spent time together discussing work, sharing stories about life in the city, or reminiscing about their childhood. Marina, with her vibrant personality, quickly bonded with Andrew, and they found common ground in their mutual interests, from art to travel. Anna saw this as a positive development. She was grateful that her sister and husband got along well, believing it made family life more harmonious. Andrew, too, seemed distant at times, but Anna attributed this to the natural ebb and flow of long-term relationships. Every couple had their ups and downs, she told herself, and they were no exception. As Marina's visits became more frequent, Anna noticed how well her sister and Andrew seemed to click. They would engage in lengthy conversations, sometimes continuing even after Anna had excused herself to finish work in her study. Marina would laugh at Andrew's jokes in a way that was perhaps a little too familiar, but Anna dismissed it, not wanting to overanalyze harmless interactions. She trusted both her husband and her sister. There was one incident, though, that lingered in Anna's mind. It was a small thing, barely worth mentioning, really. But it left a strange feeling. One evening, as they were all seated at the dinner table, Marina reached across to take Andrew's glass of water, brushing her hand against his. It was an innocent gesture, but the way they exchanged a brief glance before continuing their conversation felt different, almost too comfortable. Anna couldn't explain why it bothered her, but it did. Still, she convinced herself that it was nothing more than her imagination running wild. She had always been prone to overthinking, especially when she was under stress from work. In the weeks that followed, Anna's workload only increased, leaving her with even less time at home. Marina, on the other hand, began spending more and more time at the house, sometimes dropping by unexpectedly during the day when Anna was still at the office. Andrew didn't seem to mind. He always welcomed her visits, and their conversations often extended into the late afternoon. Anna felt a pang of guilt for being so absent, but she couldn't afford to scale back her work commitments. Besides, she trusted that Andrew and Marina were simply enjoying each other's company as family. Her marriage to Andrew had been solid for years, and Marina was her sister, someone she had always been able to count on. Why would she question them? Still, the growing tension between Andrew and Anna was hard to ignore. They spoke less, their conversations becoming more transactional than personal. Even their shared routines, like having dinner together or watching a movie on weekends, became infrequent. Anna told herself this was a temporary phase, that things would improve once her workload lightened. What had started as innocent bonding between brother-in-law and sister-in-law quickly spiraled into something far more complicated. Andrew, feeling increasingly alienated in his marriage to Anna, found himself drawn to Marina in ways he hadn't anticipated. Her youthful energy, her easy laughter, and the way she seemed to truly see him, something Anna had not done in a long time, became irresistible. Andrew had been feeling the strain of his relationship with Anna for a while now. Their conversations had become mundane, revolving mostly around work schedules, household responsibilities, and occasional updates on mutual friends. He missed the emotional closeness they once shared, the spontaneous laughter and light-hearted moments that now seemed like distant memories. Anna's intense focus on her career, while impressive, left him feeling sidelined. He didn't blame her for prioritizing her work. She had worked hard to get where she was. But it didn't change the fact that he felt lonely. Marina provided a stark contrast. Whenever they were together, Andrew felt alive again. She listened to him in a way Anna no longer did, offering empathy and understanding without judgment. Marina, too, was struggling to find her place in the fast-paced life of New York. Her relationship with Andrew offered her a sense of stability and belonging. Their interactions became increasingly charged with tension. Simple conversations about art or shared interests would linger longer than they should have. Marina found herself looking forward to moments alone with Andrew, whether at Anna and Andrew's home or during their spontaneous outings into the city. They began meeting in places far removed from their usual circles, aware of the need for discretion. Small cafes in less populated areas, quiet parks, and even brief encounters in parking lots became their clandestine meeting spots. In these moments, Andrew's guilt would surface. He knew that what he was doing was wrong, both morally and ethically. He was betraying Anna, the woman he had vowed to love and support. Marina was her sister, which only compounded the wrongness of it all. Marina, too, wrestled with feelings of guilt. She had always looked up to Anna, admired her strength and professionalism, and relied on her for guidance. Now she found herself entangled in something that could destroy that bond forever. She knew it was wrong, yet she couldn't deny the feelings she had developed for Andrew. He wasn't just her brother-in-law anymore. He had become something much more complicated. And so, they continued to meet in secret, building their affair on lies and deception. Meanwhile, Anna remained blissfully unaware of the growing bond between her husband and her sister. She noticed how well they got along, but in her mind, it was a positive thing. She had always hoped that her family would be close, and Andrew's warmth toward Marina seemed like a blessing. There were times when she thought that Andrew appeared a little more distant than usual, but she attributed it to the natural ebb and flow of their marriage. Every couple went through phases of emotional disconnect, she reasoned. Her demanding career had caused its own share of strain, and she often felt guilty for not being as present as she should be. But she trusted Andrew implicitly and had no reason to doubt his loyalty. But the secret moments between Marina and Andrew became more frequent, their emotional and physical connection deepening with each passing week. They both knew that what they were doing was unsustainable, that eventually something would have to give. Yet neither was willing to confront the inevitable consequences of their actions. For now, they were content to live in the fleeting moments they stole from the rest of the world, telling themselves that they would figure things out later. Anna's increasing absence only served to fuel the affair. Her work demands meant that she spent longer hours at the office, leaving Andrew and Marina more opportunities to be alone together. Sometimes Marina would stop by during the day when she knew Anna wouldn't be home, and they would spend hours talking, laughing, and eventually giving in to their growing attraction. Other times they would meet in the city, where they were just two anonymous people, not connected by the complicated web of family and betrayal that bound them in Anna's world. Still, deep down, Marina knew that their relationship couldn't remain hidden forever. Sooner or later, someone would notice, whether it was a friend, a colleague, or worst of all, Anna. And when that day came, everything would change. But for the time being, both Marina and Andrew chose to ignore the inevitable. The day of the party arrived without much fanfare, but to Anna, it felt like a welcome break from her usual routine. As she bustled around the house making final preparations, she was in high spirits. This event was meant to be a celebration, a gathering of close friends, colleagues, and family. She had invited people from work, as well as some of Andrew's friends. Marina, as always, was an essential part of the planning process, helping Anna with the decorations and final touches. Everything was supposed to be perfect, but as the evening progressed, Anna couldn't shake a strange feeling that something was off. She dismissed it initially as just stress from hosting the event, but subtle things began to catch her attention. It started with small glances between Andrew and Marina, little looks that lingered a bit too long. Anna, accustomed to their easy rapport, hadn't thought much of it at first. But as she observed them more closely, the atmosphere between them felt different. There was a level of intimacy there that went beyond simple familiarity. At one point, while Anna was greeting some of the guests near the door, she glanced across the room and noticed Marina and Andrew standing together near the kitchen. From the outside, it could easily have looked like two people having a casual conversation. But Anna's instincts told her otherwise. Marina's body language was telling. She was standing closer to Andrew than usual, her hand brushing his arm lightly. Andrew, who was typically composed at such gatherings, seemed distracted, almost nervous. The way they interacted made Anna uneasy, but she couldn't quite put her finger on why. As the evening wore on, that nagging feeling continued to grow. Anna tried to focus on her guests, but every time she saw Marina and Andrew together, the discomfort returned. Then, it happened. The moment that would change everything. It was a small thing, really. Something most people wouldn't have even noticed. Marina, forgetting herself in a moment of laughter, called Andrew by a pet name. A name Anna had never heard her use before. It wasn't the kind of nickname one might casually give a brother-in-law. It was something personal, intimate, and it made Anna freeze in place. The laughter around the room seemed to fade into the background as her mind raced to make sense of what she had just heard. Instead, she kept her distance, watching from the corner of the room as Marina and Andrew exchanged an awkward glance. It was brief, but it was enough to confirm that they both realized what had just happened. Marina quickly excused herself and moved across the room to talk to another guest, leaving Andrew standing there, looking visibly uncomfortable. Anna's heart raced, and a wave of doubt washed over her. Could she have misinterpreted it? Was she being paranoid? But no. The way they had reacted told her everything she needed to know. That single slip-up had opened the door to a flood of questions she hadn't dared to ask before. Suddenly, all the little things that she had dismissed over the past few months, the shared glances, the private jokes, the subtle distance that had grown between her and Andrew, began to fall into place. Later in the evening, after the initial shock had worn off, Anna found herself wandering through the house, lost in thought. She still couldn't bring herself to confront either Marina or Andrew directly, not at the party, not with guests around. But she knew she needed more answers. It wasn't enough to suspect. She needed to be certain. She needed proof. Toward the end of the night, after most of the guests had left, Anna found herself walking past the open door to Andrew's office. The door was only partially ajar, but she could hear voices coming from inside. She paused, recognizing the low murmur of Andrew's voice, followed by Marina's softer tone. Their conversation wasn't loud enough to be heard clearly from where she stood, but she caught snippets, words and phrases that sent chills down her spine. Shouldn't have used that name. Marina's voice, nervous. She might have noticed. Andrew, sounding frustrated. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She knew she shouldn't be listening, but she couldn't help herself. She stepped closer, standing just outside the doorway, her hand gripping the frame. They were talking about her. There was no mistaking it now. Everything she had been trying to ignore, all the red flags she had pushed aside, came crashing down on her in that moment. Marina said something else, her voice dropping to a whisper, but Anna couldn't make out the words. Then there was a pause, followed by Andrew's response. "We'll talk later. Not now." Anna felt a surge of anger and betrayal welling up inside her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had heard enough. The truth was there, unspoken but undeniable. Andrew and Marina were involved in something they shouldn't be, something that went beyond a simple family relationship. It was an affair, a betrayal of everything Anna had trusted in both of them. She walked away from the door before they could notice her, her mind racing with a mix of emotions. She wanted to confront them right then and there, to demand answers and explanations. Instead, Anna spent the rest of the evening in a daze, going through the motions of cleaning up and saying goodbye to the remaining guests. She smiled and made small talk, but her mind was elsewhere. Every time she glanced at Marina or Andrew, her stomach twisted with anger and hurt. How could they do this to her? How long had it been going on? And why hadn't she seen it sooner? By the time the last guest had left, Anna felt exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Marina and Andrew said their goodnights and retreated to their respective rooms, leaving Anna alone in the living room. She stood there for a long time, staring blankly at the empty space around her, trying to process everything she had just discovered. The days following the revelation were a blur for Anna. She acted swiftly, with a kind of cold, calculated precision that only someone in her profession could muster. Divorce papers were filed almost immediately, and arrangements were made for her to leave New York. San Francisco, a city she had always admired for its natural beauty and relative calm, seemed like the perfect place to escape and rebuild her life. It wasn't a decision made lightly, but the pain of Andrew's betrayal, compounded by her sister's involvement, left her with no choice. Staying in New York meant reliving the humiliation and hurt each day. For Andrew and Marina, things moved in a different direction. Once Anna had left, they took the step that seemed inevitable. They moved in together. On the surface, it might have appeared that their relationship was progressing naturally, but things quickly began to unravel. At first, things seemed almost perfect between them. Without the need to hide their relationship, Marina and Andrew spent most of their time together. They moved into an apartment just outside the city, a modest but comfortable place that offered some semblance of a fresh start. For Andrew, there was a brief period of relief. He no longer had to pretend, no longer had to sneak around or worry about being caught. He told himself that this was a second chance at happiness, something real after years of feeling distant from Anna. But it wasn't long before the cracks began to show. Marina, who had once seemed so supportive and understanding, started to change. Or perhaps Andrew simply began to see a side of her that had always been there, but had been masked by the excitement of their affair. She became possessive, increasingly controlling of his time and his attention. What had once been light-hearted teasing and playful affection now felt like manipulation. Marina would criticize him for the smallest things, the way he dressed, the way he spoke to people, even the way he spent his free time. At first, Andrew brushed it off. He chalked it up to stress, or perhaps her adjusting to their new reality. After all, they had gone from sneaking around to living together almost overnight. He told himself that this was just a phase, something that would pass as they settled into their new life together. But as the weeks passed, Marina's behavior only grew more intense. She began demanding constant reassurance of his feelings for her. It was as if Marina, having secured Andrew, was now afraid of losing him. She would question him endlessly about his past with Anna, even though he had tried to put that chapter behind him. "Do you still think about her?" Marina would ask, her tone casual but with an underlying edge. "Do you ever regret choosing me?" Andrew found these conversations exhausting. No matter how many times he reassured her that Anna was no longer a part of his life, Marina seemed to need more. Her insecurities grew, and with them came increasingly erratic behavior. She would get angry over the smallest things: a missed phone call, a delay in his return from work, a casual interaction with a female colleague. Marina would lash out, her anger unpredictable, and Andrew found himself walking on eggshells around her. Arguments between them became more frequent and more heated. Marina accused Andrew of not being fully committed, of still harboring feelings for Anna. She would throw his past mistakes in his face, reminding him that she had been the one who had saved him from a loveless marriage. Andrew, already emotionally drained from the collapse of his relationship with Anna, found himself questioning everything. Was Marina right? Had he made a terrible mistake? The apartment that had once seemed like a refuge now felt suffocating. The walls seemed to close in on Andrew with each passing day, and the weight of Marina's expectations became unbearable. He started to withdraw, spending more time at work or finding excuses to be away from home. He realized that what they had shared during the affair was not built on a foundation of love or trust. It had been built on secrecy and the thrill of the forbidden. Now that they were out in the open, their relationship lacked the substance to sustain itself. Marina, sensing Andrew's growing distance, became even more volatile. Her moods swung wildly from affection to anger, and Andrew found it harder and harder to keep up with her emotional demands. What had once been exciting now felt like a burden, and Andrew began to regret the choices that had led him to this point. The person he had once seen as a refuge from his failing marriage had become someone he could no longer stand to be around. The final straw came one evening after another explosive argument. Marina had accused him, once again, of not being fully committed, of still thinking about Anna. Her accusations were baseless, but that didn't seem to matter. Andrew, exhausted from trying to placate her, finally snapped. "This isn't what I wanted," he said, his voice cold and distant. "This isn't the life I imagined." Marina's face twisted in anger. "You think you can just walk away from this?" she spat, her voice laced with venom. "You chose me. You don't get to change your mind now." But Andrew knew it was over. The fragile happiness they had built was crumbling, and there was no salvaging it. He realized, in that moment, that he had been chasing an illusion. The idea that Marina could give him what he had lacked in his marriage to Anna. But the reality was far different. What he had with Marina was toxic, built on lies and manipulation, and there was no future in it. As he stood in the dimly lit apartment, the weight of his choices pressing down on him, Andrew knew that it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart completely. The happiness he had once sought now felt like a distant memory, replaced by regret and a growing sense of dread. Months had passed since Anna left New York, and while San Francisco had offered her a temporary escape, it had not brought the peace she had hoped for. The betrayal she had endured, not just from her husband, but from her own sister, continued to haunt her. The more time she spent trying to rebuild her life, the more her anger festered. Every day that passed seemed to strengthen her resolve. She couldn't simply move on. The wound was too deep. Returning to New York was a decision born out of that anger. From the moment her plane touched down at JFK, she knew she had unfinished business. This was no longer about saving her marriage or protecting her family. Those possibilities had been destroyed. Now, it was about taking back control, about ensuring that the people who had hurt her would face consequences for what they had done. Anna had a plan. She wouldn't confront Marina or Andrew directly. She would dismantle their relationship from the shadows. They had deceived her, and now she would use deception against them. Over the years, she had cultivated a network of friends, colleagues, and acquaintances in New York. People who still respected her despite the scandal of her divorce. These people, who moved in the same circles as Marina and Andrew, would become her tools. It started with small, seemingly insignificant comments. Anna reached out to old friends, made casual remarks about Andrew's commitment issues, and hinted at the reasons for their divorce. She never directly mentioned Marina, not at first. Instead, she allowed others to draw their own conclusions. Andrew and Marina had built their new life together quickly, and that speed left room for doubt. Anna played on that doubt, subtly suggesting that Andrew had a history of emotional instability, and that Marina had acted impulsively in choosing to be with him. Word spread quickly. New York's social circles, particularly those of professionals like Andrew and Marina, were tight-knit and gossip-driven. The rumors took on a life of their own, and soon, Marina began hearing whispers about Andrew's supposed disloyalty. Friends who once welcomed her now seemed distant, their smiles laced with suspicion. Andrew, too, noticed the change. He couldn't pinpoint the source, but the trust between him and Marina began to erode. Anna insinuated that Andrew had been reaching out to her, regretting his choices, and that he had even expressed doubts about his relationship with Marina. These lies were designed to sow seeds of insecurity in Marina, and they worked. Marina, already fragile from the strain of their toxic relationship, began to believe that Andrew might still have feelings for Anna. Anna watched all of this unfold from a distance, satisfied that her plan was working. But it wasn't enough for her. She wanted more than just the end of their relationship. She wanted to see them suffer the way she had. So she began to escalate her tactics. Anna spread rumors that Andrew had been unfaithful, that he was seeing someone else on the side. She even went as far as to plant false evidence, arranging for mutual acquaintances to suggest that they had seen Andrew with another woman. Marina, already on edge, became obsessed with the idea that Andrew was cheating on her. She confronted him constantly, her accusations growing more wild and unfounded. Andrew, tired of the endless fights and the pressure of living with someone so emotionally volatile, began spending more time away from home. He no longer saw Marina as the woman who had saved him from his failed marriage. Now, she was just another source of misery in his life, another reminder of the mistakes he had made. The breaking point came one evening after yet another heated argument. Marina, enraged by Andrew's refusal to admit to the affair she had convinced herself he was having, lashed out. In a moment of uncontrolled anger, she pushed him. The force of the push wasn't strong, but Andrew, caught off balance, stumbled backward. His body twisted awkwardly, and before either of them could react, his head struck the edge of the kitchen table with a sickening thud. The room fell silent. Marina stood frozen, her hands covering her mouth as she stared at Andrew's lifeless body on the floor. Blood began to pool around his head, and the reality of what had just happened started to sink in. This wasn't like their usual fights. This wasn't something that could be fixed with apologies or reconciliatory gestures. Andrew wasn't getting up. Panic set in. Marina dropped to her knees, shaking him, calling his name, begging him to wake up. But it was too late. The angle at which his head had struck the table had caused a fatal injury. Andrew was dead, and Marina had killed him. For a moment, she thought about running, about leaving the apartment and disappearing. But she knew that wasn't an option. She had nowhere to go, and even if she could escape, the guilt would follow her. Instead, she did the only thing she could think of. She called Anna. Anna answered the phone calmly, almost as if she had been expecting the call. When Marina, sobbing and hysterical, explained what had happened, Anna's response was chilling in its simplicity. "I'll be there soon," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. When Anna arrived at the apartment, she took in the scene with a cold detachment. Andrew's body lay where it had fallen, the blood still fresh on the floor. Marina, trembling and tear-streaked, looked at Anna with desperation in her eyes. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to ask for help in the face of what she had done. Anna stood over her sister, her expression unreadable. "This is what happens," she said quietly, "when you destroy other people's lives." There was no comfort in her words, only a cold finality. Anna stood frozen for a moment, the enormity of what had just transpired settling in. Marina, still sobbing and shaking, sat on the floor near Andrew's lifeless form, her tear-streaked face a portrait of despair and confusion. Anna knew what she had to do. The time for scheming and revenge had passed. Now, there was only one course of action left. She reached for her phone, her hands steady despite the emotional storm brewing inside her, and dialed 911. Her voice was calm as she reported the incident, explaining that her sister had accidentally caused the death of her former husband. There was no room for ambiguity. The truth, in its most brutal form, had to come out. When the police arrived, the scene was grim. Officers surveyed the apartment, taking in the blood-stained floor and the distraught woman crumpled beside the body. Anna stood apart, her expression unreadable, as Marina was taken into custody. She watched in silence as the police handcuffed her sister, leading her away. Marina didn't resist, her spirit broken. There was no fight left in her, only a dull acceptance of the fate that now awaited her. During the interrogation, Marina, overwhelmed by guilt and fear, confessed to everything. She detailed how their affair had begun, how they had kept it secret from Anna, and how their relationship had spiraled into toxicity and anger. The fight that led to Andrew's death, she explained, had been the culmination of weeks of tension and mistrust, exacerbated by the rumors and manipulations that had surrounded them. Though Marina hadn't intended to kill him, the fact remained. Her actions had caused his death. Despite her involvement in stirring the discord that had led to this moment, Anna was never implicated in the crime itself. Her role had been that of a manipulator, someone who had set events in motion, but not a direct participant in Andrew's death. The law had no reason to hold her accountable, and yet, she couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that gnawed at her. She had wanted revenge, and in seeking it, she had destroyed everything: her marriage, her relationship with her sister, and her own sense of peace. Defense attorneys attempted to frame the incident as a tragic accident, arguing that Marina had not intended to kill Andrew, and was caught in a moment of panic. They presented character witnesses who testified to her generally kind nature, hoping to elicit sympathy from the jury. However, the evidence of her affair with Andrew and the escalating tensions painted a different narrative. Ultimately, the jury deliberated for 3 days before returning with a verdict: guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The judge sentenced Marina to 12 years in a state prison, specifically at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women in New York, a place known for housing women convicted of violent crimes. As Marina was led away in handcuffs, Anna felt a mix of emotions wash over her. Relief, guilt, and a profound sadness swirled within her. While she had wanted to see Marina pay for her role in the devastation of their lives, the reality of the sentence felt far more complicated than she had imagined.